I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Jessica, cheated on me, but here we are. We've been married for 7 years, and honestly, I always thought we had a pretty solid relationship. At least I did. She's the type of woman who's got that sharp, bitchy attitude, always quick with a snarky comment or a sarcastic laugh, but she was mine, and I believed in us. We met in college, hit it off right away, and she seemed like she was all about building a future. But in the last 6 months, things started changing. She became more distant, snapping at me over small things, acting like I was invisible during our conversations. At first, I thought maybe she was stressed at work or just overwhelmed with some personal stuff. She works as a graphic designer at a pretty good firm, and she's always been a bit bitchy, always had that diva attitude, the need to be in control and heard. But she's also fiercely loyal, or so I thought. Then I started noticing little things. Her phone would be more locked down than usual. She'd hide it when I came near, and she'd get defensive. If I tried to peek at her messages, she'd say she was busy, stressed, or just tired, but something felt off. One night I caught her texting someone at 2 a.m. and she quickly slammed her phone down, acting like I didn't see a thing. That's when I felt that weird prick of suspicion. And then there was the fact that her behavior during our sex life changed, too. She'd always been a bit of a bitch in bed, demanding, sarcastic, sort of dismissive. But lately, she'd be distant, distracted, like her mind wasn't really there. I'd catch her staring at the ceiling or fiddling with her phone mid-intimate moments, which never used to happen. I tried talking to her about it, asking if everything was okay, but she'd brush me off, call me paranoid, accuse me of overthinking. Typical Jessica, she always knew how to spin a lie. But then I found something that hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't snooping. I was actually just going through my emails one day, and I noticed a new folder in our shared cloud storage, labeled Research Data. It was strange because I didn't remember her ever mentioning this project. I opened it out of curiosity, and what I saw made no sense at first. Files, graphs, some notes, nothing particular at first glance. But then I saw the file names. They weren't normal research files. They were titled Quantum Entanglement Therapy Sessions, Subject 7 and 23. What? That was weird. I didn't even know she was involved in quantum research, let alone some therapy involving entanglement. I thought maybe she was working on some personal project or side gig, but then I saw what was inside. Recordings of sessions, and wait, that's when I saw them. Two faces I recognized from her social media. One was her, Jessica, and the other was some guy I'd never seen before. Tall, serious, with glasses, definitely a researcher, maybe a physicist. But what struck me was the data. It wasn't just recordings. There were waveform graphs, measurements, and weird correlation patterns between their mental states. The notes described pre-existing connections and anomalous correlation patterns, stuff that should have been impossible unless they had some hidden link. I stared at it, feeling like I was in some sci-fi nightmare. How the hell was she involved in this? And why was she hiding it? The timing was perfect. She'd been acting strange for months, and now I see this. I was stunned, confused, pissed off, and a bit scared. Because if this research was legit, and it looked real, then she'd been secretly cheating on me with this guy during their therapy sessions, which apparently were supposed to be about connecting minds through some quantum entanglement measurements. The weird part. The waveform collapse measurements showed these strange, unexplained correlations between her mental state and his before they even started the experimental treatment. That meant they had some sort of pre-existing mental link, like they knew each other somehow before all of this. I didn't want to believe it at first. It felt like some conspiracy or a bad sci-fi plot. But there it was, plain as day. Jessica, my wife, was apparently in some deep, weird relationship with this researcher, probably more than just professional, and I had no clue what to do with this information. My mind was racing, trying to process it, trying to figure out if I was overreacting or if I was actually witnessing betrayal on an unimaginable level. I felt sick, betrayed, and furious. I wanted to confront her, but I also wanted to know everything first. I spent the next few days obsessively going over every detail I could find in those files. I looked for more evidence, tried to understand what this quantum connection was really about. It wasn't just some cheating. It was like she was involved in some secret, groundbreaking experiment that tied her to this guy mentally, before they even met in person. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about her cheating. This was about something much darker, something scientific and bizarre, and I was caught in the middle of it. I need to tell her I know, I thought. But how? What do you say when the woman you love is secretly involved in some crazy scientific affair that might also involve emotional and mental betrayal? I didn't know yet how I'd confront her, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change forever. I spent the next couple of days trying to piece everything together without tipping her off. I didn't want her to realize I'd found her secret files. Every time I saw her, she carried that bitchy smirk, acting like she didn't have a care in the world, like she was the queen of her own little universe. But I knew better. I knew she was hiding something huge. The more I thought about those waveforms and the pre-existing mental link, the angrier I got. How could she have lied to me for so long? Not just about cheating, but about being involved in some secret scientific experiment that defied everything I thought I knew about reality and trust. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I kept asking myself, was it really cheating, or was it something way beyond that? Was she just lying about everything, or was she part of something that I couldn't even understand? The images of her lying to me, sneering at my concerns, kept flashing in my head. The worst part was that she was so good at hiding it, smiling, twisting her words, making me doubt my own perceptions. That's what really got me. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, but in the way she lied about everything made me question myself. One night, I finally decided I had enough. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I sat her down, took a deep breath, trying to muster courage, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Jessica, I know what you've been doing." Her face froze. For a second, her bitchy smirk faltered. She tried to brush it off, said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I was overthinking. But I had proof. I pulled out the files on my phone, laid them on the table. "These files, these sessions, you and some guy, some scientist, what is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Her eyes narrowed, and that damn smirk came back. "You're reading too much into it, Mike. It's just research. You wouldn't understand. It's complicated, and frankly, it's none of your business." She waved her hand dismissively, trying to make it seem trivial, but I wasn't buying it, not anymore. I pressed her further. "You've been lying to me. I saw the waveform patterns. I saw the correlations, Jessica. You're telling me that pre-existing mental link stuff is just coincidence? That you're not involved in some crazy scientific experiment with this guy?" She scoffed, crossing her arms, and looked away. "You're being dramatic as usual. This whole thing, this quantum stuff, it's just some research project I was working on, okay? It's complicated. I don't expect you to understand. You're just jealous because I'm smart and I have a career, not some dumb husband who can't keep up." That word "dumb" hit me hard, like she was trying to diminish everything I felt, but I saw through her act. I knew she'd been lying all along, and yet her words hurt worse than the betrayal itself. It was like she was trying to gaslight me, make me doubt what I saw, what I felt. I was furious. How could she be so callous, so cold? I realized she'd been lying to me, hiding her affair, hiding this whole secret scientific experiment, and now she was gaslighting me into doubting my own mind. I didn't want to lose my shit in that moment, but I was close. Instead, I told her I needed space, time to think, to process what I knew, and I left the apartment. I walked around the block trying to clear my head, but the images kept flashing. Her lying, the waveform graphs, the pre-existing connections. The idea that she'd been involved with this guy in some secret, scientific way was like a punch to the stomach. I'd always thought I knew her, but now I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I started to question everything, all the moments we shared, all the memories. Were they just part of her cover story? Was I just some guy she married out of convenience while she was secretly involved in this mind meld experiment? I kept thinking about the files, about the correlation patterns showing mental links before they even started the therapy sessions. That meant they known each other long before I ever saw her with this guy. Was I just a pawn in this bigger game? The thing is, I don't believe in coincidence. I think some part of me always knew something was off, but I refused to see it. Now I couldn't unsee it. The betrayal ran so deep, I didn't even know if I could ever forgive her. But I knew I had to confront her again, this time not just about the affair, but about whatever dark, scientific secret she was hiding. That night, I laid in bed awake, feeling more betrayed than I ever had before. It was like my entire reality was crumbling around me. Jessica, my wife, who I thought I knew, was involved in something that sounded straight out of a sci-fi novel, connecting minds through quantum entanglement, pre-existing connections, waveform collapses, all while she was lying to my face. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this wasn't just about cheating anymore. It was about trust, reality, and the dangerous possibility that she'd been lying to me about everything, about who she was, what she was involved in, and how deep this rabbit hole went. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat much. Everywhere I looked, I saw her, Jessica, smirking, dismissing me, acting like I was some paranoid idiot. But I knew she was lying. I could feel it in my gut. Every time I caught her sneaking that look or the way she'd avoid my eyes, I got more certain that I was dealing with something way beyond a simple affair. This was some kind of scientific espionage, or at least that's what it felt like. And the more I learned, the more I realized I was in over my head. I decided I needed to dig deeper, find out what this research really was about. I started to dig into her work emails, her work laptop, anything that might shed light on her involvement. I knew I was crossing some line there, but honestly I didn't care. If my wife was involved in some secret project that could manipulate minds, I deserved to know. And I needed to confront her with everything I found. One evening I confronted her again. I told her I knew about the files, the research, the pre-existing connections. I told her I'd seen the waveform graphs and understood enough to know she was lying. She looked at me with that same bitchy smirk, like I was nothing more than an annoying fly buzzing around her perfect little life. "You don't know what you're talking about, Mike," she said, crossing her arms. "You're just jealous I'm smarter than you, and you're mad because I'm finally doing something that matters. This research, this therapy, it's about helping people, not cheating on you with some guy. You're just paranoid. You always think the worst." I was furious. Paranoid. Jessica, I saw the files. The waveform correlations before the sessions even started. You said you were just doing some research, but this is more than that. It's like you've got some kind of pre-existing mental link with this guy and you're hiding it from me. How long has this been going on? How deep does this rabbit hole go? She rolled her eyes and scoffed. "You're such a drama queen, Mike. You're overthinking again. I'm done with this conversation. If you don't trust me, that's your problem. Maybe you're the one who's insecure and jealous of a woman who's smarter and more successful than you. I don't have time for your stupid accusations." That's when I snapped. I'd had enough of her bullshit, her lies, her dismissiveness. I grabbed her by the shoulders and looked her straight in the eyes. "This isn't just about the affair, Jessica. It's about the fact that you're involved in some kind of scientific experiment that connects you mentally with this guy, probably long before you even knew him. I want the truth. No more lies, no more bullshit." She pushed me away, her face twisting into a sneer. "Get out of my face, Mike. You're jealous and insecure. You don't understand the science, so you're making a mess. I don't owe you explanations about my work. If you don't trust me, maybe we're better off apart." I stared at her, feeling a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and helplessness. She was justifying everything with that bitchy attitude, acting like I was some crazy, jealous husband. But I knew better. I knew I was onto something huge. Later that night, I sat alone, staring at the files again. I couldn't stop thinking about those waveform graphs, how they showed correlations that shouldn't exist outside of some quantum entanglement. I read about the research, about the possibility of people forming pre-existing mental links, maybe through some kind of subconscious connection or deeper part of the brain we don't understand yet. It was all so crazy, so mind-bending. I couldn't tell if I was losing my mind or if this was the real deal. And then, it hit me. Maybe the reason she was so defensive, so dismissive, was because she was hiding how deep this really went. Maybe she was involved in some secret experiment where they were trying to connect minds, and she was using me as her cover story. Maybe that's why she was so bitchy about everything, because she was guilty or scared I'd blow her cover. I knew I had to do something. I had to confront her again, but this time, not just with accusations, but with proof. I started to plan my next move. I needed to get access to her research lab, her files, her email correspondence with that scientist. I needed to see how far this mind connection went, what they were really doing, and most importantly, whether I could use this knowledge to get to her, to make her face what she'd been hiding from me all along. I also realized that I couldn't just blow up her world all at once. I had to be smart. If this research was as dangerous as it seemed, if they really could manipulate mental states and pre-existing connections, then I had to be careful. Jessica might be hiding secrets, but there could be others involved, and I had no idea what kind of fallout I'd be unleashing. All I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I was done being the naive husband trusting his wife blindly. Jessica had crossed lines I never thought possible, and if I didn't act now, I'd be the one left in the dark, completely betrayed, and maybe even mind-controlled in some weird way I couldn't even comprehend. So here I am, figuring out my next steps, trying to stay calm but knowing I'm on the edge of something much bigger than I ever imagined. If this was a movie, I'd say I was in the middle of some crazy conspiracy, with Jessica as the key player. But this is real life, and I have no idea what's coming next. All I know is that I won't let her manipulate me, no matter how deep her scientific rabbit hole goes. The more I thought about everything, the clearer it became that I had to act fast but carefully. Jessica wasn't just some wife who cheated on me. She was involved in something that stretched the limits of what I could understand, something about mind connections, waveforms, and pre-existing links that sounded like science fiction. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that she'd been lying to me, hiding her involvement all along, and that realization made every moment feel like walking on a razor's edge. I started to put together a plan, an infiltration of sorts. I knew her work was mostly done at her research lab downtown, in a building I'd seen her drive to often, but I'd never been inside. It was a high-security facility, probably with safeguards I didn't even know about. Still, I wasn't about to sit around and wait for her to come home and spin some bullshit story. I had to see it myself. I needed the evidence, something concrete to confront her with, or maybe to use as leverage if things got really ugly. One evening, I sneaked out and drove to her office building under the cover of darkness. I waited until she was supposed to be at a late meeting, then slipped in through an unlocked side door I'd noticed earlier. I moved quietly through the hallways, my heart pounding with adrenaline. Every step I kept thinking, what am I about to find? Was I walking into some secret lab where they were doing experiments on mind control? Or was this just a crazy theory I was chasing? Either way, I had to see it for myself. The lab was on the 12th floor, and I used an access card I'd stolen from her purse to get in. The place was sterile, cold, like a typical research facility, but with a strange hum in the air, like some kind of low-level energy. Pulse. I found her workstation, and there it was, more files, some encrypted, but also some unencrypted logs of experiments, scans, and waveform data. I couldn't understand everything, but I could see enough to know they were measuring brain activity during these so-called entanglement therapy sessions. And the data was freaky, patterns that showed correlation between two different brains, even before they supposedly connected. Then I saw the most disturbing thing, a file labeled Subject 23, which I recognized as her, Jessica, and Subject 7, the researcher guy. The data showed their brainwave patterns aligned in ways that defied normal science. It was like their minds had some pre-existing connection, a bond that existed long before they even met. The waveform graphs looked like some kind of cosmic dance, a series of peaks and troughs that mirrored each other perfectly, even when they weren't in the same room. It was like they'd been linked through some invisible thread, a connection rooted in something far deeper than I ever knew. I grabbed a copy of the files on a USB stick, feeling like I'd uncovered something too dangerous to ignore. This wasn't just about Jessica cheating. This was about some scientific experiment that could manipulate, or even control thoughts and feelings on a level I couldn't even comprehend. And Jessica, my wife, had been involved in it all along, probably as a participant or maybe even as a scientist herself. I slipped out of the building just as quietly as I'd entered, heart racing, hands sweaty from the adrenaline. When I finally got home, I rechecked the files, trying to make sense of what I'd found. The more I looked, the more I realized that this wasn't just a simple affair. Jessica's involvement in this experiment meant she wasn't just cheating on me physically, but mentally, emotionally, on a level that could threaten everything I believed about her, about us. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the USB stick, feeling overwhelmed. I knew I had to confront her again, this time with everything I'd uncovered. But I also knew that by doing so, I was stepping into a world that was far more complex and dangerous than I'd ever imagined. What if she was part of some bigger scheme? What if she was being used or was using the experiment for her own reasons? And then I remembered the waveform data, the correlation patterns, and the pre-existing connections. What if that bond was something she couldn't control? What if she'd been manipulated or entangled in ways I couldn't see? That thought haunted me. I was starting to question whether she'd ever truly been with me at all, or if her mind had been somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach, some place where I wasn't welcome anymore. I knew I couldn't just walk away from this now. I had to face her, confront her with these facts, and get answers, real answers. But I also feared what I might discover next, because if this experiment was real, and it seemed to be, then everything about our relationship was built on a fragile, possibly manipulated foundation. I felt like I was in a science fiction nightmare, and I had no idea how to get out of it. Still, one thing was clear. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. The truth had become too big, too dangerous to ignore. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I couldn't keep my mind steady. Every moment I felt like I was walking on thin ice, just waiting for everything to shatter. I had the evidence now, the research files, the waveform data, the pre-existing connection. Patterns, but what next? How do you confront your wife about a secret that's so far beyond normal betrayal? I kept asking myself, did she even know what she was involved in? Or was she just another pawn, manipulated by some larger scientific scheme? The lines between truth and lie kept blurring, and I couldn't tell which way was up. I decided I had to see her again, face her head-on, and get the answers I desperately needed. I planned to do it the next evening when I knew she'd be home from work. I'd prepared myself for an intense confrontation, bringing the files, the USB, everything I'd uncovered. But I also knew that Jessica was a master at lying, at twisting the truth to her advantage. She'd deny everything, accuse me of paranoia, try to make me doubt my own perceptions. And that's exactly what she did when I finally sat her down. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk, crossing her arms like I was the one in the wrong. "You're kidding me, right?" she snapped, eyeing the files I'd laid out on the table. "You think I'm involved in some crazy science experiment? Are you out of your mind? You're just jealous, Mike. Jealous that I'm smarter, more talented, and actually doing something meaningful with my life. You're so insecure, it's pathetic." She scoffed and rolled her eyes, acting like she dismissed all my concerns with a wave of her hand. I looked at her, feeling every ounce of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. "Jessica, don't lie to me. I saw the waveform graphs. You and this guy had pre-existing connections before the sessions even started. I saw the files, the notes. You're involved in something way beyond just research. Are you telling me this isn't true?" She scoffed again, her bitchy attitude shining through. "You really think I'd do something like that? You're just imagining things, Mike. Maybe I've been working late, maybe I've been stressed, but I'm not some scientist involved in mind control or whatever you're accusing me of. This is just your paranoid mind running wild. You always jump to conclusions." That was the moment I snapped. I'd had enough of her bullshit, her lies, her dismissiveness. I leaned forward, voice shaking with emotion. "No, Jessica, I've seen enough. I know you've been involved in this experiment, and I know that. Pre-existing connection data proves you've been lying to my face. I can't trust you anymore, not after this. You've betrayed me on a level I never thought possible, and I want the truth. Now." Her face twisted into a sneer. "You're such a jealous, insecure man. I don't have to explain anything to you. If you don't trust me, maybe we're better off apart. I've got work to do and I don't have time for this drama." Her words cut deep like a knife. She was dismissing everything, acting like I was just some jealous husband making a fuss over nothing. But I knew better. I knew she was hiding something much darker. There was a part of me that wanted to break down, to cry, to lash out. But instead, I forced myself to stay calm. I told her I needed space, time to process everything I'd learned. I left the apartment feeling hollow and betrayed, like I'd just lost the woman I thought I knew. Walking outside, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. The cool night air did little to clear my mind. All I could think about was the waveform graphs, the pre-existing mental links, the fact that she'd been hiding this from me all along. How deep did this rabbit hole go? Was she even truly herself anymore? Or was her mind, her feelings, just some part of this larger scientific experiment? I sat on a park bench and stared up at the stars, trying to make sense of it all. The truth was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. Jessica had always been a bit bitchy, yes, but I'd loved her. Now I wondered if I ever really knew her at all, or if she had been some kind of scientific pawn all along. I kept coming back to those waveform patterns. The data suggested that their minds were connected long before they even met. That meant this wasn't just about sex or betrayal, it was about a deep, pre-existing bond rooted in some kind of quantum entanglement. And I wondered, was she aware of it? Did she control it? Or was she just another victim of this experiment like I was a victim of her lies? I realized I couldn't just walk away from this. I had to dig deeper. I had to find out what this research was really about, who else was involved, and whether I was just a pawn in some larger game I didn't understand. And yet, at the core of it all, was this aching feeling of betrayal, like my entire world had crumbled around me. The woman I loved, the woman I married, was somehow involved in something so far outside normal human experience that it terrified me. I started to wonder if I'd ever feel safe again, or if I was destined to live in a world of secrets, lies, and unseen connections that ruled us all without our knowing. The following days were the hardest I've ever experienced. I stayed up nights, obsessively reviewing the files I'd stolen, trying to piece together what I'd uncovered. The waveform data, the pre-existing mental links, the way they seemed to mirror each other, like two halves of a whole that had been connected long before any physical relationship started. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled onto something profoundly dangerous, something that could change everything about how we understand consciousness and relationships. Jessica, of course, acted like nothing was wrong. She kept her bitchy smirk, dismissed my accusations, and continued her routine as if I hadn't. Just laid bare her secret scientific involvement. I saw her glance at her phone, probably messaging that scientist guy or some other colleague, and I felt a surge of anger and helplessness. Did she even realize what she was part of? Was she aware of the extent to which her mind had been entwined with someone else? Or was she just another pawn, too caught up in her own ego and ambition to see the damage? The thing that haunted me most was the waveform graphs, the patterns that proved their minds had been linked well before they ever met face to face. That pre-existing connection was like some invisible thread binding them, something that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. And the more I thought about it, the more I believed she hadn't just cheated on me physically. She had been involved in something much more profound, something that possibly erased the boundary between her and that researcher, between her thoughts and his. I decided I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I sat her down, tired but determined, and laid the evidence out on the table. "Jessica, I know what you've been hiding. I know about the research, about the waveform data, about the pre-existing mental link. And I'm not going to pretend I don't know anymore." My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. She looked at me with that same bitchy smirk, trying to brush it off. "You're overreacting, Mike. This is just some stupid science stuff. You don't understand it. You're just jealous because I'm doing something meaningful and you're too stupid to get it." Her words cut deep, but I refused to be manipulated by her. "No, Jessica," I said, voice rising. "You've been lying to me. All of it, your affair, the research, the secret experiments. I saw the files. I saw the waveform graphs. You were involved in some kind of mind connection project long before any of this started, and I want to know, how long has this been going on? What kind of pre-existing link do you share with this guy? Are you even you anymore, or just some part of this experiment? She scoffed and rolled her eyes, trying to dismiss me. You're just paranoid, Mike. Honestly, I don't have time for your stupidity. If you think I'd cheat on you with some scientist, you're even more delusional. Then I thought, maybe you're the one with the problems. But I knew better. I knew I'd seen enough to understand that her affair wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, rooted in some deeper, scientific entanglement. The waveform data proved that they had a pre-existing connection that couldn't be explained away by coincidence. That meant she hadn't just betrayed me in bed. She'd been involved in some experiment that could control or influence thoughts on a fundamental level. That realization hit me like a freight train. Jessica wasn't just a cheater. She was part of some larger scientific scheme. And I didn't know whether she was fully aware of what she was involved in, or if she was merely a victim of her own ambition and the people pulling her strings. Either way, I had to get out. I had to cut ties to protect myself from whatever unseen forces were at play. I packed a bag and left that night, not sure where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay. The betrayal cut so deep that I felt like I was losing my mind. The woman I loved had become a stranger, an accomplice to a secret that might change how we understand consciousness itself. Every moment away from her felt like a step toward clarity, but also a descent into chaos. I was no longer the same man who had trusted her blindly. I was someone who had uncovered a terrifying truth, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully recover from it. Now I sit here writing this, not for any fame or recognition, but because I want someone out there to understand how deeply betrayal can run, how it can twist your mind and shake your reality. Jessica's betrayal wasn't just about unfaithfulness. It was about the boundaries of the mind, the unseen connections that bind us, and the terrifying possibility that some of us are linked in ways we never consciously know. And I've learned this: trust must be earned, and sometimes the truth is stranger and darker than anything you'd ever expect. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I'll never look at love or science the same way again.